Hey, welcome back. Yvonne Wakefield's YouTube channel. Reading from Babe in the Woods, a 3-book series. We've gone through Babe in the Woods, Building a Life, one log at a time. Tonight we'll keep on self-portrait. So a little bit of backstory. Last time I talked about Teddy Bear, remember the new adopted dog. He has started to go to obedience school. He's really good. And I just wanted to show you tonight that he's got a monogrammed scarf tee. And not to be excluded, the other boys, Zachary and Henry, also have monogram scarves. But I want to start out this podcast with, when I was at the cabin last week, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was just on the hillside, just right next to the cabin, and this big black bear was there. And I went and I clapped my hands, and it just like kind of hung out there and it wasn't doing anything. So I ran up in the loft, I got my Saturday night special, I ran back down and I shot 2 gunshots off in the air just to scare the bear away. And he went uphill. Well, Henry, I don't know if anybody can see him on the couch, the little dog, he's totally deaf. But Zachary isn't. And Zachary apparently was right by my feet when I shot off the pistol, and it scared him, and he was shaking and shaking. And he went in the cabin and he was shaking. And I thought, oh, I loved him. And I thought, well, that's okay. And then all of a sudden I can't find him. And I'm using 2 whistles and I'm yelling his name for hours and I can't find him. Finally, I see his little head pop up down by the creek and he's looking like kind of weird, crazy. And then I can't find him again. So around 8 o'clock at night, I made a backpack with lanterns and matches, thinking I'm going to go have to rescue this dog. And here he comes walking down the trail. Well, he got temporarily deaf when I shot the pistol off, which also made him totally scared because he was deaf and then he went and hid in the woods. So Zachary is getting a lot of tender, loving care right now. He's a little bit older than Teddy, but he's coming back slowly. So, just wanted to say, hey everyone, Zach's coming back. Okay, so tonight we're going to go chapter 12. And this is kind of fortuitous because in the chapters here, I'm dealing with bears, and I'm dealing with them. I just hope I don't have the same consequence that I had last time. So chapter 12 is really short. It's 2-page, and it kind of gives you the backstory of how I got to the cabin, the rest of my family. So the chapter 11 before that, it talked about how I learned to use a gun, how bears got into my cabin. They actually went inside my cabin and trashed it. And I started to build a bear-proof studio and a cellar, which I had to hand dig because of the bear situation. So chapter 12. Familiar history. 50% of my family is dead. The other half is alive, and well, most of the time I don't know where they live. There was a time when my life was secure and certain as a nuclear middle-class family could be, in a home as proper as the parents who adored and cared for their children. Then my father died and home security shifted. When my mother went the way of my father, that foundation fell the way of both my parents, 6 feet under, gone forever. In a heartbeat at age 14, I inherited the middle role in a freshly minted trio of sibling orphans as broken and disenfranchised as me. I also inherited that small trust intended for my education when I turned 18, a fund eroded by managing embezzlers. At 17, I hired an attorney to protect what was willed to me. Years later, I am still fighting and paying a way to say what is fiduciarily weighted losing battle. Instead of spending the funds on a matriculated diploma, I bought a deed attached to 80 acres. This teenage real estate transaction also qualified me to advise my teenage siblings to buy land before you spend all your inheritance on things that will either get you killed or jailed. The year after I purchased my land, my brother Mark followed my suggestions and bought 40 acres about 4 or 5 mountain drainages west of my place, depending on how deep a draw is measured. A year later, my sister Anne responded to a letter I sent her and bought 80 acres half a mile below my property with a dilapidated cabin I lived in briefly while building my own cabin. Even though she was my closest neighbor, she came and went unpredictably, so I rarely saw her. My brother was another story. For the first time since orphans stamped our lives, we are all separated. We were once again claimed residents in one county. At 18, 19, and 20 years old, we collectively owned 200 acres, as remote as the values and securities that had once stabilized our childhoods. A picture of our past is preserved on the top bookshelf in the cabin in a framed photograph of the happy unit we once were. We were posing for a stranger solicited to shoot a still with one of my mother's Leica cameras. It's a freeze frame of our family in San Francisco, typified by a Sunday brunches at the top of the Mark or Jack Tar after a holy stint in St. Patrick's. Our church clothes are off-gassing the incense of high mass and oily perfume-drenched arthritic grandmas too crippled to genuflect before cathedral pews. A mink stole snaps around my mother's pearl-throated neck. My father and brother are dressed in sharply printed suits and ties. My sister and I sport white patent leather shoes and identical mother-sewn frilly dresses. Today, this tableau of my family is as vacuous as the inside of my rural mailbox, as out of touch as a 747 jet in overhead flight. Now my family connections consist of aging, wayfaring orphans who come and go and collide on this mountainside only by infrequent coincidence. Since returning, I'd neither heard nor seen from my brother or sister. None of us had a phone. We are communicatively untethered, connecting with each other through handwritten letters and notes cached inside a mailbox rusting at the end of a graveled road 7 miles below my cabin. Except for the weekly Weimar insert, it is usually empty. Any semblance of familiar connection in my life is growing inside a red-painted log cabin 3 miles below my cabin. The Nelsons, a big and big-hearted Mormon family, cramped that space, but they always had room for me. Just knowing them filled a hole hollowed in me the day my last parent was deep-sixed. One morning, hungry for companionship, I put the aluminum pail on my head. Remember, I had to put an aluminum pail on my head because these goshawks were dive bombing me below a nest. Past the goshawk nest, I removed the pail, and 3 miles later, I leaned the rifle against the outside wall before knocking on the mudroom door Rhonda opens. We catch up on the local news, which is not as substantial as the lunch I help her fix and serve. At noon, like clockwork, Rhonda's husbands and kids file in and sit down to eat a meal I am invited to share. Glenn bows his fatherly head and begins grace with, "Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful." And he goes on until an amen concludes the prayer and eating begins. The Nelsons' kitchen is not a fancy restaurant with finger bowls. Everyone wears traces of ranching and logging on their played-out work clothes, not the shine and elegance of cufflinks and ruffles. Buckets, jugs, and containers on the counter are evidence of the milking, butchering, and egg collecting that goes on daily. The stove is cool to touch only at night when the bedroom lights go out. The kitchen is the heartbeat of a neighborly family developing in my life as blood family fades in a photograph on the shelf. On the hike home, I juggle a jar of peaches Rhonda has given to me, tossing it high and twirling it once before it lands in my open hands. Miles later, I set the jar down to put the pail on my head and spy blazing new yellow surveyor tags tied to branch tips distance from the goshawk tree. After positioning the pot so it doesn't obscure my vision, I march on, one hand pumping a mason jar, the other weaving a rifle back and forth, imagining the flickering tape as confetti. I am a majorette, marching to my own tune, in this parade of one I am leading on. All right, well, thanks for listening to chapter 12. That was a quickie. As always, you can find my books wherever books are sold, and Kay Webster does really incredible narration on Audible of all these books. But you know how I always end with stay hydrated? So today I played 18 holes of golf, like right before this, in 95-degree weather. And I found this electrolyte powder. It's called From Basic Care. It costs about 50 cents a pack. You can get it everywhere. Mix it with 1.5 liter of water. I went through 2 of these today. It's hot out there. There's fires. Thank you, firefighters. Keep on listening. Keep on subscribing to the YouTube channel. It's free. Like, what's free anymore? Is anything free? Arturo, is anything free? Your lap is free. Teddy's on Arturo's lap. It's really cute. He's just like cuddled up. All right. Anyway, we will see you next week. Stay hydrated. Beverage of choice. Electrolytes help. Bye-bye. See you next week.